Today we're going to look at section 1.0, which is an introduction to statistics. It's kind of going to give us some definitions of things we'll use throughout the year, and the beginning to look at data analysis. So at the end on your homework, you're going to need to be able to identify individuals and variables and classify them as either categorical or quantitative. So we're going to start with just some definitions, some vocabulary. So the first one is what an individual is. It's an object described in a set of data, and they can be people, animals, or things. On each individual, we're going to find what is called a variable, which is an attribute that can take different values for different individuals. For example, maybe it would be the hair color of an individual, so everybody could fit into a different category. Variables have two different kinds. We have what is called a categorical variable. Sometimes this is also called a qualitative variable. It's the same thing as a categorical variable, depending on the textbook. This would assign labels that place each individual into a particular group called a category. So for example, the hair color, that would be a category. It's either blonde, brown, red, so forth. The other type of variable we have is called a quantitative variable. This one takes number values that are quantities. You can be able to count or measure. So maybe it would be like the height of people or something like that, something that assigns a number to it. When we have our variables, the quantitative variables can then be broken down into two different types. Categorical is just categorical. Quantitative, we can have what we call a discrete variable. So this is a quantitative variable that takes a fixed number of possible values with gaps between them. So these are what we would call like countable numbers. So you could have just like 1, 2, 3, 4, so forth. You cannot have fractions. You cannot have decimals. It has to be whole numbers. And then we have continuous variables, which is a variable that can take any value in an interval. So this could be any number. It could be a decimal, it could be a fraction, it can be anything. So you need to be able to know the difference between discrete and continuous. When we're analyzing data, we're going to look at some different things. So a variable generally takes values that vary. We are interested in the pattern of that variation. So that pattern of the variation is what we're going to use when we call it a distribution. The distribution of a variable tells us what values the variable can take and how often those occur. A lot of times the distributions are graphs or tables, things like that. So for example, right here, this would be looking at a distribution. We have a nice little table. It talks about where someone's from, what gender they are, how many languages they speak, if they're left or right-handed, their height, their wrist circumferences, preferred communication, in-person, Facebook. So you might be asked to classify these variables as something. So in here, preferred communication, you're putting them in a category. They like one of the few things in their communication. So that would be considered a categorical variable. So when we do that, we will usually make like a bar graph of some kind. So all of this is like looking at a distribution. We have a graph, or we have our data over here, anything that we're looking at. So when we want to look at another one, maybe we want to look at the number of languages spoken. This is a number, so this is going to be a quantitative variable for the number of languages spoken. And when we have quantitative, you're usually going to make dot plots, histograms. We're going to get into graphs later on in this chapter, but different things that we might be able to make, we put it above the numbers. One thing you'll be asked to do afterwards is analyze data. So we're going to examine each variable by itself and then study relationships among the variables. Okay, so when we do this, we're going to start with graphs. So we would take our numbers, make some type of a graph, add some type of a numerical summary. This is from a computer, but we're going to learn how to do it on the computer and on a calculator, all sorts of things. And then you would analyze the data from what is given to you. So from data analysis to inferences is what this whole class is going to get to. We're going to start very simple with data analysis. By the end in semester 2, we'll be looking at inference, which is like hypothesis testing, confidence intervals, and things like that. So what's happened is we'll start with a population, a big group. We'll take a sample of that population. We will learn different methods of sampling. From that sample, we'll collect data from it. So we have a representative sample, we have good data. We're going to find what's called descriptive statistics, which is like mean, median, mode, different things like that. We'll perform our data analysis. We'll make an inference about the population, say something in general about all of them. And then with that is called our inferential statistics. Sorry, I can't talk this morning. So we're just make a big circle. So we're going to start now this week or this next couple weeks on just the collecting data part, and we'll just work our way through this big circle. So at the end, you can do everything.